If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, then like many a teen, you were at the mall playing pinball and video games at the arcade. Over the last decade, pinball has made a huge comeback thanks to fans of the game opening up their own arcades that collect classics and the newest ones that are made by only two or three surviving pinball manufacturers. Spinner's Arcade in Frederick has taken their arcade one step further, and they've included a nonprofit that operates inside the arcade called Pinball EDU. Spinner's general manager JB Dunn joins me along with executive director Joe Saeed of Pinball EDU to talk about their mission and how their inclusive arcade brings kids and adults together in a meaningful way. Good morning, gentlemen. And Joe, let's start with you. Tell us how the idea of Pinball EDU came about.
Thank you, Amelia. My background is in assistive technology and working with people with disabilities from an education side. And then I got into the competitive pinball world. Felt the need to become a top 100 player, learn all the games, travel around and do that kind of thing. And playing, I ran into a number of people that may have appeared to be on the autism spectrum, and specifically one individual, Robert Gagnon, out of British Columbia. I got to talk to his parents, and he was somebody that grew up with severe autism. And given kind of my background in working with people with disabilities, I also am an electrical engineer, and then working, in the pinball kind of arena, seemed like something that we needed to do was connect families with autism and pinball and kind of just see what would happen. I mean, if it worked for one person, I felt it's got to work for more than one person.
Looking at how you've set up Pinball EDU inside Spinners, your certified autism center, what exactly does that mean?
It means that all of our staff has sensitivity training to, an individual with autism. We're a low sensory environment, but that's not to say that somebody couldn't have, say, a sensory issue. And if there was something that would happen, maybe, a loud crash, for example, they would be somebody that we would kind of prioritize, making sure that they're okay. So it just really is a layer of sensitivity training, and also to tell caregivers that our community center is somewhere that has people that are trained and that they can feel comfortable.
Doing this program for a couple of years now and talking about autism, Asperger's, and people with disabilities, having an open space and a public space for them to go to get out of the house not only gives them a break and a way to socialize, but it also gives the family a little bit of a break too, that they can let them kind of go do their own thing. Are these some of the changes or some of the things that you've seen in the people that are coming to Pinball EDU?
I think one of the things that we put first and foremost is our social component. So being able to play with your parents or your kids is a huge part of what we're doing here. You go to other places and you kind of let your kid go do something. Or if you're going to go to an arcade and have fun, you may not take your kids there because maybe they're, engrossed in their cell phone or online gaming and that type of thing. Really, we put the inclusion factor and the social aspects first and foremost.
Okay.
You see an 8-year-old that doesn't understand pinball. Well, typically their parents, at least a long time ago, have seen a pinball machine and know how it works. So just teaching your kids a new thing,
Right.
and then maybe your kid's better than you at it. You can also play pinball together, either individually or one person uses one flipper, one person uses the other to kind of get the idea of what's going on. Those type of interactions, I think, have been some of the most profound things that have happened here.
So, and I noticed in the back you have a whole bunch of machines that are in disrepair. A lot of them look like they're from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Are you using those as well to work with these students?
We have a volunteer kind of collective that will teach, people typically on the spectrum, but we have lots of volunteers of all sorts, how to do some basic things, maybe taking things apart or putting things together, replacing rubber bands, that type of thing, as well as just general awareness of what's under a pinball machine and that it's not like a cell phone and how complicated it is. Restoring coin-operated anything is a dying art, but it's not to say that it's not fun. It's also something that you can learn and adapt some of your engineering, physics, STEM education just by doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you can actually have educational programs there for local schools in the Frederick area as well. And anybody listening to this that owns a pinball machine is probably chomping at the bit to go, hey, can I come up there and you could teach me a couple things so I can work on my own machine? So that brings me to you, JB. Let's talk about spinners for a second. I won't own a machine just because I can't work on it. So your
Sure.
your arcade is open to the public to come play pinball and a ton of other classic arcade games. Where do you get the machines, and how many of these do you have inside the arcade?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that like our first mission above all else is inclusivity, right? Like we want to create a space where everyone feels safe and included. I was a teenager in the 90s. So for me, the idea of an arcade just represents so much of my like formative years. So we've got about 40 pinballs, and we've got somewhere around 70 classic arcade games, ranging everywhere from the early 80s all the way through the 90s. In terms of where they come from, that's a wonderful question. So we have actually a group of collectors that have generously donated most of what we have. I mean, by most, I would say probably about 90% of what's on the floor has been donated by a collector. Again, because we're a charity, we're kind of reliant on that. We couldn't be more thankful for what we have. So pretty much everything you see on the floor has come from somebody that's like, man, I believe in what you do. Here's a game so everybody else can enjoy it as well.
Because I know a lot of folks that have games in their basements and they're just sitting there collecting dust because they've beat it several times. And that seems to be what pinball is all about. You're trying to learn how to, do those combos. You're learning how to hit the targets.
Absolutely.
You're trying to get the high score. And Lord knows you can hear me yelling and screaming inside spinners trying to beat that rush machine that you've got. So,
oh, yeah.
For 98 Rock listeners, how much is admission to play all the games, and what else do you have at Spinners for the general public?
Admission is $15, and that's free play all day, which means there are no extra tickets, no tokens. We very firmly believe in the idea of gaming for the sake of gaming as opposed to some like reward-based system. Not to say that there's anything wrong with tickets, but I'm a firm believer that there's a sense of accomplishment that comes from gaming that sort of gets a little muddied when you start adding tickets to it that they can go get like, a whistle from the desk at the end of the day. But like I said, it's $15 free play all day. Every cent of that goes back to the charity as well.
Look at that. So you're playing pinball, stuff that you haven't probably done in years and years, and it's helping out Pinball EDU. And Joe, who is Pinball EDU open to? How do they get involved?
So right now we're working on developing a lot of our day programs. We work with the ARC, Community Living, the United Way, Boys and Girls Club, the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, those type of organizations, and they will bring groups to our place and be able to learn about the classic games and play together. We also are working with the school systems to develop a STEM day trip and being able to see what's underneath the pinball machine, like we were saying, it's pretty profound what's under there, and understanding things like electromagnetism, the circuitry, and those type of things, and just the sheer amount of wire that goes into a real game, versus a cell phone. That I think gives a level of awareness there.
Yeah, it does. I've seen underneath it there, and it's like spaghetti to me. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to figure out what wire actually turns that LED light on in the back, and how do I replace all of my old bulbs with LEDs? So yeah, you're gonna have some people calling you guys going, hey man, can I come up and take a class on how to fix my pinball machine? Where can people go to find out more about Pinball EDU, come play in the arcade with their family, or even to donate a machine, JB?
So if you go to spinnerspinball.org, that's our website for everything, and it's always in the process of being updated. And you can contact Joe and myself directly through there if you have any specific questions. But most of the info that, like the frequently asked questions that people would have, are pretty easily answered from that website. We're super available to reach out to and ask whatever isn't readily available on there.
JB Dunn is the general manager of Spinners Arcade in Frederick, Maryland, and Joe Said is the executive director of Pinball EDU. I will get those links on our website, 98online.com. I'll include your Instagram and your Facebook as well. And thank you both so much for joining me today and talking about your love of pinball to make an inclusive space that improves the lives of the people and kids you offer services to. I look forward to coming back and playing more pinball with both of you.
Thank you so much. We look forward to having you again.
Yeah, thank you, Amelia.